Hello, hello. My name is Ricardo, and I'd like to welcome Vince Omni, the author of an amazing novelette, 1989.
Oh,
Um,
thank you so much.
yeah, I read this book. I forgot it was like a month or two ago. I think right around the time it just came out, and I was ecstatic. And I also just love short books. Not every book needs to be 300 word pages. It's just my opinion. But yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, Vince, talk a little about who you are and how this kind of book came to be.
Sure, yeah. First of all, Ricardo, thanks for having me, inviting me to this interview. I'm very grateful for an opportunity to talk about 1989 with you. I mean, I tell my students that one of the things I love to talk about is myself and the things that I'm working on. So yeah, and so I teach at Lake Forest College in Lake Forest, Illinois. I teach African American Lit and creative writing. I like to write fiction, short stories, novels, some dabbling in screenplays. I feel like I have like a cinematic bent to my writing, and I think
Mm,
that's from spending way too much time in front of a television screen. So
okay,
yeah,
now we'll definitely get into that.
so yeah, so yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And then 1989. So the book is very interesting for a few reasons. One, so for those that don't know, 1980 is it's a novelette, so it's a little shorter than traditional novel. But also it's set in a very specific place, right? Late 80s, Denver.
Hmm.
That I'll be honest, I have not seen too many, if any, books set in that, especially like the Black community in that time. So I feel like you can, there has to be like some reason or,
Yeah.
for how that came to be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could talk about that. So, yeah, I grew up in Denver. I was born in California, but my mother was a Denverite. So, I was raised in Denver, Colorado from like age 2 or 3 until I left for high school at age 18. And then I was still a resident. Like I went to college back and forth to a small college in Minnesota called St. Olaf. But I would come home for the summers. And so I actually just continued to live there sporadically off and on, but I haven't lived there as a resident probably since the mid 1990s, 90, 95,
Right.
96, somewhere around there.
And
Um,
we'll get into like the setting of Denver a little bit later because I do want to talk more about that. But I also want to read I want to get to the book and why. I mean, one of the reasons I love it, but for those it's a book, I guess. I mean, it's a book about basketball, but also about like so many other things.
right,
You just rarely see basketball in like a store in a literary form. I think I read, Hanif Abdurraqib's
right.
book a year or two ago, but I haven't. I think this is the second book I've ever read that includes basketball, which I loved as a kid.
Mhm.
Detached a little bit more as I got older, but I'm from the era of like when Allen Iverson was big, right? Like that was like the big. So
Yes,
little bit
yes,
different than this era, but
right.
yeah, so how did you end up writing, like, a basketball novelette?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because first of all, like I love basketball. I was never in danger of being a tremendous talent on the basketball court, right? But, I grew up with a group of, I grew up in a generation where everyone thought, "Oh, man," a lot of men thought, "We're gonna grow up, we're gonna be ballers, we're gonna be hoopers, we're gonna play for the rest of our lives." And that worked out for a lot of folks,
That's
just
funny.
not for me.
I have a similar story. So, I mean, anybody that's met me in person, I'm 5'7", I'm not a tall guy, right? Like, but I was actually pretty good. I was actually not to toot my own horn, but I remember my sophomore year of I made the team my freshman year in high school. I was trying out for my sophomore. The coaches loved me because I was like a defensive player. I had a lot of grit, right? And I could take a
Right.
punch. But I remember I went to my basketball coach my sophomore year and I told him, I was like, "Hey coach, I was thinking of playing again this year, but there's also this like business and math club that I was gonna join. And I think those honestly take me further than basketball will." And then
Mhm.
my coach, he puts his arm around my shoulder, looks at me, and he's like, "Ricardo," I'm trying to think if I should curse. Yeah, why not? He's like, "Ricardo, you're the smartest motherfucker on this team. He's like, I
You
wish
can't lose.
everybody thought like that. But yeah, a lot of people, especially in Chicago, like my team won the city championship, Gwendolyn Brooks Eagles, right?
Wow,
So
wow, okay.
everybody and two of the guys, both the guards ended up playing D1, right?
Right.
I don't know what happened to them after that, but they did play D1. Yeah, I come from like a very competitive, very intense like basketball school environment. Um, so when I was reading it, I was like, oh God, it's like being in high school again.
You know, and I played a little bit of high school hoop. I played a year of college and a D3.
Nice.
And you know, I just loved the game. I did.
Hmm.
I still do. I still follow the pro game, especially around this time of year when things are amping up for the playoffs. You know, so you know that's when I start to really tune in a lot. But I keep track of my hometown team, the Denver Nuggets. You know, because
Oh, you're not. Okay,
I'm
I'm
a
not
Nugget.
gonna get into. I'll ask Nuggets questions at the very end because I do think we could easily turn this into a basketball chat.
Right, right, right,
But so the novel. So one of the things I find, one of the central themes or ideas behind the novel as well, in addition to basketball, is you have this queer basketball player, whose story is kind of being told secondhand, right?
right.
Church, through Davion's interview, and I was curious, like what kind of led to that decision and like that kind of narrative. And I'm very interested because there's not like it's I mean, but like in sports, especially basketball, like there's I think
Hmm.
only been one like openly gay basketball player, Jason Collins. I don't know of any others that have been and none since. So I'm curious how you like approach that and how you decided to like, explore that kind of queer narrative in
Yeah, sure. So I mean, so I heard a lot of questions in there, so I'll just
answer whatever which one ever you want.
I'll start with like kind of like the motivation, like the inspiration for it. Like I was a teenager playing at the King Center in Northeast Denver, Park Hill. Park Hill is the same neighborhood where Chauncey Billups came out of. So I was there. It was summer. We were playing, some pickup games. And there was a coach. He wasn't my coach. He was just a coach. He was a guy in the building watching kids play hoop. And he kept doing the same thing that church does to Davion at the beginning of the book, which is calling him out his name, using these gender-based slurs to kind of like, infuriate him. And I was a kid at the time. So, I mean, I'm ashamed to admit that worked for me, but he kept doing that to me. And then later he told me on the sideline, he said, "Well, I kept saying that because, see a lot of potential in you. I want you to work harder, this, that, and the third, yada, yada, yada." And he actually turned out to be a helpful person. Like, he actually turned out to be a helpful person as far as like, you know, basketball knowledge is concerned. Like, helping me to increase my basketball IQ, helping me understand the things that I need to do if I want to continue to play basketball. It really became a helpful person. But I always wondered, like, I was curious about like interrogating that kind of, you know, that frame of thought, that frame, that motivation. Yeah, like why motivate me in that way?
Mhm.
And, not just that, but the '80s that, was just a very, like there was a lot of toxic masculinity going around. There was, where I grew up in Denver, this is an era where the Crips and the Bloods came to town from Los Angeles. And so there's a tradition of, or I shouldn't say a tradition. There was a point where, the guys in my neighborhood went from fighting with their fists to shooting each other. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? So there was just a lot of hyper, what we would call, what would be considered by society hyper masculine behavior going around. And I wanted to push back on that and to interrogate that and to learn more about the motivations for it. And I was curious, what would have motivated someone to take that particular approach with me,
Mhm.
to motivate me to play harder. And and I just kind of arrived at, what if this guy, and I'm not trying to make any speculation about this person who was heckling me on the sideline, because I don't know anything about their sexual history or their sexual, how they identify themselves. But I just wondered, like, what if this was like a, kind of like a mask for this
Mhm.
person? And if it was a mask, what would it mean? What did that mean for him and for his life and the way he moved through the world?
No, I deeply like empathize with that. I remember like when I was growing up, so I played on like played like near the school park, right?
Okay.
Um, but I was at the time I was probably like 12, 13, right? But I would play with like grown men, right?
Mhm, mhm, uh-huh.
And you would think like like a grown man, like somebody my age, would see a 12-year-old and think, oh, let me treat him like a 12-year-old. But like no grown men on the court will try to fight you. They'll fight you and they'll call you names and they'll do this and that to make you, to make you tough, right?
Mhm,
And it's always, the same tired excuse, right? Like
right.
look at it, they did it to me and look how I turned out. And it's like, no, you're fighting a child.
Right,
Like you didn't turn out well if you think fighting a child on a basketball court is great. But
exactly.
so, yeah, I think it is. I mean, I'll be honest, like one of the reasons I stopped playing as when I got to like my 20s, I loved it as a kid, but like the toxicity is like it's crazy. Like at my age, I can't I'll never be a pro, right? But I'm on as a 20-year-old, like I'm playing against people that think that they were pros, had their chance, and like it is
Mm.
like people taking like their insecurities out on you, right? And I wish we, especially men could like just acknowledge that like, that that's really where it comes from and not like lay the blame on someone else, right? Because you missed your shot or whatever.
I think that, and I can't really I can't really even begin to speculate like for men of my generation. 'Cause, I'm 54, so, and of course, the title tells you I was in high school in 1989. In fact, I was, a year away from graduating, at that point, so, um, I'm sorry, my window
Ah,
is open, there's a
don't
truck at
worry
me.
about it.
But, like, I think, hoop dreams die hard.
They do.
Hoop
Woof.
dreams die hard, and I think for people who love the game and who gave a lot of themselves to the game of basketball, the idea of stepping on a court and not, and differentiating your level of play for others, especially, younger players, just feels like something that they can't do.
Mhm.
I guess I to a certain extent I could see that, but I think when you're talking about how there are guys who get on the court and they treat it like going to war. We're
Mhm.
just playing noon ball or
Yeah,
we're in a pickup game. Like, calm
exactly.
down, calm down,
Yeah,
calm down.
exactly. That's what I'm saying, like, it's hard for me now to get to play basketball at a pickup game with people that are, like, in their 20s and 30s because it is war, like, to people, it is war. It's like, "This is my time to shine." And I think it is, value, right? Like, a lot of people think, "I'm not valuable outside this court, so now I have to
Mm.
show up." It is there's a lot going on there, but
A lot of athletes, male, female, they dedicate a lot of their lives to learning a game, learning how to play a sport, and oftentimes, lose their identities in that process. And so, understanding who you are off of a basketball court, or off of a soccer field, or off of a volleyball court, that's also important, right?
exactly. So one of the things, when I was reading it, one of the quotes by Hemi Aguda was in the beginning. She said she talked about, and this was in the foreword. She loves when people that are deeply passionate about something kind of like wax poetic about it. And she kind of compared your novel to like her electrician friend talking
Right.
about wiring. And I
Mhm.
really love that because I'm the same way. Like I can listen to anybody nerd out about a very specific subject. I might not understand, but I'll listen with joy. And one of the passages she quoted I'd like to read aloud.
Okay.
A riot of purple, pink, and orange filled the darkening sky. Like the gods were running a pickup game and one of them sank a once in a lifetime shot. Dr. J leaping from one side of the court to the other, his arm sweeping the ball beneath the backboard and kissing it off the glass before falling back to earth. And this is not the only time that you just like create such vivid imagery about like, basketball and you kind of like create a sense of place with Denver. But yeah, like what where are you drawing from outside of your childhood experiences to like create this book, right? Like are there games, specific games or
Oh,
basketball
yeah.
moments that you recall, movies, film, as you said you're big into. But where is that inspiration coming from? And because I'm sure other people would want to know, like, where do you get these beautiful
Oh, yeah,
imagery?
yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Like, for instance, that particular passage right there, I'm thinking about the Dr. J shot, right? The
Hmm.
one where he brings the ball under the backboard and, you know,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
And
like an
sweeps it up.
iconic shot. He leaps from one side of the court to the other under the backboard, like, swishing, swinging his arm underneath the backboard and laying it up on the other side against the Lakers, and that's like that's an iconic move right there, and that's also, Ross Gay, the poet Ross Gay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he writes about that in, a book of poetry called Beholden, and so I think that's how iconic that particular shot is. So for that particular moment, that's one of the things I was thinking about, but I think in general, like, it's 1980s basketball, it's considered to be like a golden era in basketball, you had the Showtime Lakers, you have the Celtics, you have the Michael Jordan who's ascending, like he's taking over the NBA. The Detroit Pistons are coming up. They're poised to win back-to-back championships in the late 80s and 90s, and so it's like there's a lot of basketball happening, and so I think about, for instance, in that first part of the book, you have Davion and his uncle Junior are watching like tape and they're watching the 1987 game 5 of the 1987 Eastern Conference Finals between the Detroit Pistons and the Boston Celtics, where Larry Bird steals Isaiah Thomas's inbound pass and dishes it off to Dennis Johnson for the layup. Like that's an iconic moment. That's seared in my brain because I was so angry. I love, like, outside of the Denver Nuggets when I was growing up, outside of the Nuggets and, Alex English, Fat Lever, Kiki
Hmm.
Vandeweghe, all those players, the Detroit Pistons, the 1980s bad boys was my team. Like, all my friends
Yeah.
wanted to be like Mike, and I just wanted to be like Isaiah Thomas or Joe Dumars, and so, yeah, so that was so devastating for me when I saw that. I was like, "Oh my god, I was crushed. I was crushed." So that made it in there as well.
Yeah, I was thinking I did look when I saw the title, I was wondering, I was like, is this book because you're a Pistons fan? Like but yeah,
I am, yeah, yeah.
I my era, which it was very fun, very different. But so I grew up when I grew up, Derrick Rose was becoming popular, and I'm from Chicago, so
Mhm.
Derrick Rose actually grew up like in the similar neighborhood as me, actually same neighborhood down the street. But yeah, he was like and still is basically like Michael Jordan level status in Chicago, right? Like it's like Michael Jordan, Derrick Rose, like untouchable. But then, injuries and all that. So but yeah, it's an art form that lends itself to there's so many like vivid imagery, so much vivid imagery.
D Rose was such a talent, like, to watch him play, that was just amazing, right?
Yeah. That was I miss it. But in another question I had for you about this book, and I thought was very interesting about the format. So the book, it's actually told in an interview kind of format, right? Like, or
Mhm.
the premise of it is an interview, and the protagonist is being interviewed about, his time, decades ago, back when he was in high school. And I'm curious how you kind of came to that structure and how you kind of
Mhm.
decided like you wanted to do that as opposed to just like a more linear, story of just Davion in high school.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So in the early stages of this story, like when I would give it to people to read, some beta readers, my friends, basically people I meet at workshops like you, folks I met at workshops, the folks I met in programs, they were like, "Yeah, this is a great story. But have you considered, like, what is the occasion for Davion relaying this story? Like, why?
Oh.
Why is Davion at this point in his life talking about these things? What's going on?" And you know, I kept getting that feedback, and I was like, that's really a good point. And so I wanted to create like a narrative frame that would allow him to be retrospective.
Mhm.
right? And, I think The Interview is the classic, sports sports conveyance. Like you
This
so
is
much so
true.
much that so much that we learn about athletes is, conveyed through interviews. And so and I started just tinkering with that idea. It would be a great way for Davion to reflect about his time with church. It would be a great way for Davion to also update the readers about what's happening with Davion 25 plus years later.
Mm.
Like, how did his life turn out?
And one of the things that I think you did well that also Pemmiaguda mentioned was that, like, even though it is, 25 years later, like, it's not as if he's like retelling it and he has like all the answers. He's not like, oh, I knew exactly what I was doing. I did it right. I would do it again. Like, and that kind of narrative also is like a little bit more boring, right? Like somebody's, saying like they figured it all out. But you have somebody who like made mistakes in high school, understands them to a degree, but is like kind of replicating them even in the future in a different vein, but doesn't necessarily like recognize that, right?
Right.
Um, and I think you kind of like show that how like people change to a degree, right? Like they change and then there's a plateau, right? Like there's only so much, right? And yeah, it kind of leads me to, and I don't want to spoil the ending, but I think from one of the things I got from the ending, one of the ideas I kind of took away was this idea of like redemption, grace, forgiveness, right? Of not spoil it, but because of certain decisions made, certain people had to live out the consequences of their actions, and some turned out better than others. But they're ultimately like learning how to accept the decisions they made and how to accept this person that they are, right? No, I mean, if you can kind of talk a little bit about like, how that came to be, right? Like how these characters ultimately ended up, but not like giving it away.
Sure. Like that also is a great question. I think that it would be disingenuous for Davion to have everything figured out, for Davion to have all the answers, and for Davion not to question any of his motives or any of his the things that were driving him during this period of his life as a teenager. And I think when we think about human development, like we know that, for instance, that our minds are that the prefrontal lobe not fully developed until, mid-20s. So, oftentimes, we've made very adult decisions before we've had a chance to fully develop, right? And
Right.
for men, I mean, some people might argue that for men, that's longer than that.
I'd argue that.
Like, um, so we make a lot of decisions that impact the rest of our lives before we've even had a chance to fully develop.
Right, right.
And so I think, for a character like Davion, uh, you have this chance to look back on your life and reflect upon it and realize, hey, you still have questions. Hey, uh, you still have some residual pain.
Mm,
And the idea of his father, Davion's father, because I mean that's the rub, right? We have a young man in 1989 who's been who's been, for all intents and purposes, cast out of his home because he and his father is an abusive man. Right? His father is an abuser, so he's been exiled to a new city, a new school, and he's trying to find his footing. And basketball is his end. That's his thing. And I think that knowing that, having a chance to look back on that and then have his father resurface in the front story, right? Have his
mhm.
father going through this come to Jesus, I'm born again, I'm trying to make amends type
Yeah.
of situation. That is also something that is like messing with him, right? Like he's like, oh, this dude, like he's this dude's really fucking with me right now. Like I don't have time for this dude right now. It's it was really meant to be like, an opportunity for him to reflect, but also an opportunity for him to see, well, what kind of patterns do I engage in? What kind of patterns from then do I still engage in now?
Mm,
What kind of trauma am I still dealing with?
right.
And so, And that's kind of like what, you know, what led me to that. And so having the answers is not, having the answers when you are still being inundated with new data, being inundated with new circumstances and new choices in life, you know, it's disingenuous to think that he would have the answers.
And I think that like it also like raises also like a very very touchy question, right? But like this idea of like what do we owe the people that have like hurt us? Because I
Mhm.
remember to that end, there's like a line towards the end, I don't remember the exact line, but, somebody's talking to Davion and they say, "Well, you know, your mother has forgiven your father, so, like, why can't you?" Right? Like, and it's a hard question, right? But, like, and I'll pose it to you, but, like, to what do we owe the people that have hurt us, right? Like, it's in regards to forgiveness, especially when you have all these kind of, like, these men that are constantly like hurting each other in ways they don't understand, but like, you know, where do you draw the boundary, where do you find acceptance, like, you know.
I think that's something that everyone has to answer for themselves. I can't tell like another person, what they owe someone else who has hurt them, who has caused trauma to their lives. So I think that's an individual question. I think what we owe ourselves is a lot of like grace, a lot of understanding, and then an opportunity to be accountable for any of the harms that we may have perpetrated as well. Like, I think that's what we owe ourselves. As far as
Mhm,
like do when we forgive other people, that's only something, or if we forgive other people.
mhm,
Right, because sometimes there are some things that people just don't come back from, like, right? There are some acts of violence, some acts of trauma that just for certain people are just unforgivable, and so, I think whenever someone is dealing with that internally, when they do that or if they decide to do that, that's something that's up to them. But I think that we owe ourselves, like, some grace. We owe ourselves some understanding, and we also owe ourselves an opportunity to just be reflective and try to be honest with ourselves about, how these things have hurt us and how they may have impacted the way we move through life. And are we repeating patterns, for instance? And if so, what can we do to disrupt that, to interrupt it so we don't pass it down to anyone else?
okay. I will say 1989 is essential reading for any young man in this country, especially now. I am very, very happy we got the chance to talk about it. And I have one last, not a serious question. But who is winning the NBA championship this year?
Oh, oh, mm-mm, mm-mm. Boy, well, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I'm pulling for the Nuggets,
Right,
but they've
right.
had a lot of injuries this year. They haven't had a chance to kind of regroup and become a cohesive unit yet. Uh, who's gonna catch Oklahoma City, right? In the West, who's gonna catch Oklahoma City,
Yeah.
uh, and San Antonio? Like those are some major teams right now. And in the East, the Pistons are firing or were firing on all cylinders, but then Cade Cunningham went down, and I'm not sure what what his health prognosis is like right now.
Mhm,
But it does, that's I would be really concerned. I
mhm.
would be really concerned. So yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say, but I think it's going to come out of the West. I think the winner will be, from the Western Conference.
You know, in the spirit of talking about talented yet toxic men, my favorite NBA player and team is Anthony Edwards at the moment. So I know he's got issues off the court, but I love watching him play, and I am becoming a Minnesota bandwagoner by the day.
Anthony Edwards is an amazing talent. I don't know a lot about his off court experiences, but I know on the court he's an amazing talent.
Yeah.
I know Nas Reed is also, Nas Reed, DiVincenzo. You have, that's a pretty, and then there's a couple of younger players, Bones, and well, Bones isn't that young, but he's youngish. But you have Bones, Highland, and somebody that they just got from Chicago, right? A
Wow, you
guard.
you really know. You're keeping up.
Like I said, I love the game. I do. Like, it's something that I love, but I could also recognize some of its I c I can recognize its faults. And I recognize how it could chew people up and spit them out. The process, like these hoop dreams, they last a long time, they die hard. And, there's always a lot of support for people who are aspiring, but when it's all said and done, what do you do? Like, how do you re-enter a life where basketball is not the focus of your world?
Right. And I mean, in a way, it is like war, right? We
Right.
support them as they're going to war, but as soon as they need help and they're recovering and they come back, we
Mhm.
forget about them, right? So in a way, they're right about that. I'll say.
Right. But I try to keep it in perspective. Like, I'll tell you a story. So when I was growing up in Denver, I used to work at Jack in the Box.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's Super Bowl Sunday. My supervisor, I forget which year. I think this is like it was the year that the Denver Broncos were playing the team from Washington. Okay. So what's it? Doug Williams would have been the quarterback in Washington. Um and he was having an amazing year. And so I was asked to work at work the Super Bowl shift at Jack in the Box. And my manager was like, "I'll let you bring in your little TV. You could watch it, watch the game. It'll be quiet." And it was. And I was happy until Douglas Smith got loose, until their Washington team's running game got loose, and then by halftime it was pretty much a miserable situation for Denver. And so somebody comes through my drive-through at halftime, and I'm the only one there. So I take the order, I make the food, I give them the food and give them back their change. And this guy gets out of he takes the food, he drives over, parks the car, comes into the lobby, and then he hands me this document, in triplicate. And he's like, "I'm quality control for Jack in the Box." And right?
Oh,
I'm quality control for Jack in the Box. And this is your score for today's encounter. You have an 89. You would have scored higher if you weren't snarling at me when you gave me my food. You weren't, if you didn't mean mug me the whole time. And so ever since then, I try to just like I really haven't watched football much since then. So I kind of let the Denver Broncos go, and football in general was like I had to let that go. And when I watch basketball, which I love, like I said, it's a sport I love, so I continue to watch basketball, but I try to remind myself that these are millionaires who get to
right.
play a game they love for an obscene amount of money, and so it's not worth that kind of heartache when there's other stuff happening in the world that's more important.
Wait, I wish a lot of Bears fans had that perspective, but I feel like it's the only thing that matters here.
I'm not commenting on any Bears fans. I don't want that smoke. I don't want
Yeah.
none of it. No, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. We're talking Bears fans. They're not gonna be watching this anyway.
Bears fans? I didn't say that, Bears fans. Don't come looking for me.
You can come find me. I live in Chicago. You know where I'm at. Anyways, thank you so much, Vince.
Yeah, man. Thank
This
you,
has been so
Ricardo. I
fun.
appreciate it. I really
This
do.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
has been great. And yeah, everybody, I just want to reiterate Vince Omni, 1989. And if you
Yes.
have any, I want to reiterate that in all seriousness, if you have any young men in your life and you're watching this, please, please, please give them this book, right? Because I do think it speaks to a certain kind of young man that would really, like, really benefit from. So thank you once again.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed myself.
Cool.
Thank you so much. And thank you for
Buddy.
reading the book and reviewing it.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, I'm sure I'll be seeing you around.
Oh yeah, we'll see. We are bound by our experience at storyboard. So
Right.
so
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so
abs-
much. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the beautiful weather.
you too. Take care.
I'll
Thank you.
see you.